fragment off a portion of him, herself, that doesn't yet know how the story plot ends, so we get to be surprised.
Mm-hmm. Well, that makes sense. One of the things that you were talking about on the radio show that I was listening to was material about the male and female energies within us uniting.
Yeah.
Would you care to share about that a little bit?
You bet. You know, one of the big topics right now is this whole idea of shamanic androgyny. Mm-hmm. Within the spiritual realm, you know, the shamanic beings of the ancient tribes, many of them were well known as being carriers of both the positive and negative charge, carriers of both the masculine and feminine, the active and the passive. And we even have this diagnosis now in our psychological spectrum called bipolar, mm-hmm. in which you know, there are certain individuals who no longer adhere to simply one side of the spectrum, being this or that. They actually are beginning to energetically and experientially be both this and that and everything. There, you might call them the test pilots for the new way. Mm-hmm. And in the ancient shamanic tribes and traditions, it was not unusual for individuals to carry within them what they called the berdache factor, or the androgyny, that enabled them to at least feel into both sides of the gender spectrum, so that you would potentially be able to feel, a man could feel another man like a woman does, mm-hmm. and a woman could feel another woman like a man does, not necessarily with the idea of doing anything about it unless you chose to.
Right, right.
But the idea of having that accessibility to that viewpoint and to have those kinds of, you might say, energetic perspectives available in your sensory system. Mm-hmm. And so we have all kinds of topics that come forward now about the homosexuality and even what they call transgender, where individuals born in the body represented by one gender actually choose to have themselves surgically altered because they feel more of a sense of identification with the opposite gender than they do with the ones that their body features. Mm-hmm.
I remember.
And so the energies on the planet are, you know, they're changing places and they're changing perspectives, and the humans who are sensitive are changing right along with them, just so that we can begin to see things. We can look at this whole life experience of 3D like the multi-dimensional crystal it actually is and was meant to be.
Do you notice people gaining in sensitivity and empathy who are experiencing an accelerated process? You know, being able, well, you just talked about that, being able to feel the other as oneself. I noticed that increasing in myself. Heightened senses, definitely increased empathy, which triggers emotional responses often.
Indeed, indeed. And then, of course, even the reactivity, when you have people who are reactive to those expressions, like those who are anti-homosexual right now or anti-transgender, they react only because of the fear of the possibility that they might have to deal with more than their sensory system is able to handle. So they innately go the other direction. And yet, even with that kind of display of preference, and even some of the more passionate, vehement opposition, all that we're really doing is further establishing the idea that these changes are happening and that they're producing results, you know. And some people who are just as sympathetic and compassionate about the folks who are having some questions about who they are and what they are, there's just as many people who are trying to close the door and run from it, which just further establishes the point. It's happening.
Interesting.
So we had a great 2-hour discussion on Golden Hawk's show with Robert Sabella, who's a really cool metaphysician friend of mine. up in Vancouver, BC, and Golden Hawk and myself, we wanted to have the genders represented, and was interesting that all three of us had experiences within ourselves and personally these various shifts in attitudes and awarenesses, not necessarily reflective of our preferences for sexual expression, but just simply our awarenesses and our shifts in perspective as we grow and expand into these new spiritual realms. So all three of us had those experiences, and it was just a matter of putting it all together and saying, what do we think this is going to mean, not only for the individuals, but for society? And we could easily see that 2 hours was not nearly enough, so we're probably going to be doing more soon.
Oh, good. Well, you're quite familiar with my own sexual history from my book.
Oh, yeah. You've got a great story, by the way. I love that book.
Thank you. Tales of a Zany Mystic, available at Amazon.com. I got to get a plug-in once in a blue moon. But
well, and if they haven't read it, I would say read it. It is a wonderful and zany journey, let me tell you.
Thank you. And as you know, I'm what's the word? Favorably inclined, or shall we say, I'm familiar with the gay world, having gone through 30 or 40 years of that experience myself, and all the torment and denial and angst and pain and then gradual self-acceptance, and then immersing myself in it and coming out the other side with a different view of life.
Yes.
And it's quite a wonderful experience, and you know, though I don't have any relationships in the moment, and I don't pursue any kind of contacts, and now, being 59 and all that, I'm more interested in the inner processes than the outer ones, but I treasure those experiences, and
you have that backlog to draw on when you're doing your inner work now.
Yes, exactly. And, you know, that helps me as well with the meeting of the feminine and masculine sides within. So it's really been a great boost, even though it was quite it seemed like quite a, what do you call it, a thing that you don't want.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's been quite a fun house ride.
Not so
fun ride.
Yes. So.
But, you know, those are the courageous people. You know, you can always tell the pioneers because they're the ones with the arrows in their back. And those who've had to go through those kinds of experiences just to be true to their own inner voice are going to be richer for it in soul and in message, in life message. And as the doorways open more and more to having those life messages told, and as people become more open to understanding that we fall in love with the soul of an individual, that plumbing is only just a small part of that whole picture.
Yes.
It's really a dance of souls that perhaps have been together throughout many lifetimes and have put on and taken off bodies like so many overcoats.
Yes, absolutely.
That we no longer count that as being the primary element. It's just it's a piece of the picture, and certainly not to be completely denied, but it isn't the whole thing by any stretch. Now the kids, on the other hand, who are coming in now, are really scaling those walls with very little effort. I know that there are some kids who aren't quite completely awake to their metahuman roots and their abilities, who may be still going through some suffering over it. But for the most part, when I talk to it seems that my age group of people who are drawn to me and my message, they're anywhere from 16 to 35. And so they're very expressive and very very willing to share and to be shared with. And they scale those senses, you know, they say, we're not heterosexual, we're not bisexual, we're trisexual, which means if it's sexual, we're going to try it.
Bravo.
And there's really very little problem, you know, for them to experiment and not have to feel like one experiment or even a group of experiments or even a year of experiments would be a defining factor one way or the other. It's like, this is where I am now, but I may not be here for the rest of my life. I'm just doing it day by day.
Right, exactly.
Which is how they're wired. That's how the metahuman being must function if we're going to make it through the eye of the needle and on to the next dimensions.
Yes, and maybe you could address that aspect of what the process that we're going through, whether it's in today or tomorrow or 2011 or 2012 or 13, the eye of the needle and moving into another dimension. That definitely seems to be a process that we're headed towards. Yes.
Yeah, and when we think of like the Ark, where everybody got on 2 by 2. Mm-hmm. And the whole emphasis after that big disruption and destruction and reconstruction was everything was in twos. So it was like, you might say, the reestablishment of a dualistic kind of idea of up and down and hot and cold and this and that and me and you. Instead of hot and cold, it would be hot as cold. It would be me as you. It would be you as me. Mm-hmm. There is, for example, in the Zany-verse, there is a version of Daniel, there is the me that is you. Mm-hmm. And then in the Daniel verse, there is the you that is me. And it's all perceptual at those levels. We're not even certain from the standpoint of physics that the actual or the what someone like to say is the objective reality even exists. Because everything is in motion, and everything is deeply affected by the eye that observes it. The eye that observes it actually becomes the arbiter of how it's viewed and how it's established as reality. Yeah. Or when we go back to the book of Genesis, where all the animals were created and the animals were paraded past Adam, and God said, go ahead and name the animals, and whatever you call the animals, that's what they'll be. And so the animals were paraded past him. And then you might say during these times of reestablishment of a oneness paradigm instead of a dualism, right? We all get to name our animals, and we all have to start out with the idea of this is me, the giraffe. This is me, the monkey. This is me, the bird. This is the me that is the panther or the stallion. I want to meet me, the stallion, by the way, but that's another story entirely.
We can probably do a whole show about that one, huh?
Yes, we can do a whole story. Daniel stallion. But when we go through the eye of the needle, there's just one eye in that needle. Just like there's a third eye in the middle of our forehead, and the images of the two eyes come together and create that unified vision of the coming together of the dualistic, the polarities into a oneness interpretation. The more an individual is able to see and interpret his or her reality as a reflection of self, the more personalized everything becomes. So that's the triangle aspect. This the triad has always been a key figure, a key symbol in the third dimension, where we talk about the two polarities coming together at the tip or the apex, being that is the unity of the two. And each unity of the two presents its own combination, its own recipe of beingness, so that there might be a gender male who has these certain personality characteristics, gender female that has these certain personality characteristics that don't necessarily match what we think of as female or male. And it all comes down to the idea that it's now you. It's a universe, and it all looks like you. So we, across the years when we get